Okay, great. So this is part five. Um, so if you go to your textbook, this is TYU two Theory of Constraints, TYU two, page 91. You'll need that to so you can pause this and quickly have a quick read of the question to sort of see what's going on, just to kind of understand what the thinking is behind theory of constraints. I've sort of talked about it, but I think this is a good um, illustration, if you like. Great. So pause it and then read it, and then I'm going to carry on. So what you have here is, as I'm sure you've read, is that um, you have this business that has a process, and it has three parts to the process: A, B, C. It could have been anything that we had here. If we go back to my slide here, just think of, if you like, um, this process over here. It could have been any of these. This could be A, B, C, really. But the key point is that it can only take a certain capacity, as you can imagine. Only a certain number can go through um, each each time. So that's the capacity it can take, um, just because they're different processes, right? As you can imagine. Anyway, and what they tell you though is that given this scenario, um, we it tells us that, well, we could do, for every additional unit that we sell, technically think of that as your marginal revenue. If you can sell an additional unit, if you can do something to sell an additional unit, you'll make 25 grand for every additional unit you sell. So you might be thinking, right, as I mean, if you look at it right now, right, rationally, we're typically limited or restricted by there's no point, I talked about that earlier on in the first video, there's no point making 400 items because at A, because you'll just have 150 sitting around not doing anything. So the argument is you can only make 250 ultimately, right? Because then you save. And yes, we have to accept that A and B are somewhat redundant in terms of capacity because we're limited by C. So this question is sort of thinking of how to improve matters, if you like. So your first, it gives you a couple of options, and you can see that initially the options that it gives you in the textbook is to invest. If you think about it, it says invest in a new machine for process A, or replace process B, or buy an additional machine for process C. So the truth is that the first thing you want to do, the first thing you're thinking of is think of it like this: you can't. There's no point doing A or B because no matter how you improve A or B, you're all still going to be restricted by C. So the natural alternative, first of all, is to look for ways to improve C. Yes, to improve C. Right, so the argument here is that I put here C, choice C is holding us back. So the question says to us that we can look at point 3, says if you buy an additional machine for process C costing 2 million, so we know that we have this outlay of 2 million. This will increase capacity by 300 units. So here we are, choice C. If we um, increase whatever, buy this machine, we will have a new scenario where this will look like this now: 400, 300, and this will increase by 300 units, taking us to 550. So this becomes our new scenario. But as you can see now, wow, this is brilliant. But there's no point in making up to 550 because you're restricted now. So this is what you see, this idea of these um, new bottlenecks arising when you fix a machine. That's not a bad thing. It means that you're constantly trying to improve, if you see what I mean. So it means that in effect you're now limited, if you like, by B. So because you're now limited by B, because there's no point, actually I'll leave these ones off. I'll put this here. Because you're now limited by B, ultimately the improvement we see therefore by fixing C ultimately is an additional 50 units, right? That we can now, the additional benefit ultimately is 50 units because we've gone from 250 to 300 ultimately, despite buying a new machine. So what do we have now? We have additional benefit, 50 additional units at 25,000, because it tells us we get 25,000 for each unit. So we have 50 additional units at 25 grand, giving us 1.25 million, although we had to lay out an initial machine of 2 million. So overall, we have a net loss of 750,000. So we might think, well, this isn't really profitable. We might as well just stick to what we're doing at the moment. Although I don't know what your loss was. Your loss is currently, we don't know, but this is what our loss is at the moment. So that's, but the question does ask you that, listen, if you did have the funding, could you possibly buy more than one machine to sort of manage the situation? So let's see what that means. So on its own, it's not worth it. I've written here, but can we afford to further invest in another machine? So we know so just think of buying more than one machine. So you're not only improving one process, you're trying to improve two processes to see if this will enable us arrive at a better, at a profit, if you like, or a better contribution, I should say. So imagine you decide to fix C first, and you now think, okay, the new bottleneck becomes B. So what I'll do is I'll buy both machines. I'll replace both machine. I've written here, let's replace both machine B and C. So if I invest in two machines for process B and C, ultimately I will have moved from this thing over here, because the new machine B will double the output of B to 600. So I'll have moved from here, if you like, to here. Yes, I would have moved from here to here. Ultimately, that's what I would have. So now, ultimately, this will be my bottleneck. A will now be my new bottleneck, because again, like I say, there's no point producing at 550 or at 600 because you're held by machine A. So, but the question is, what is the cost of investing in both machines? Well, it is the cost of, and let's look at it here. The cost of both machines, if you like, is 3.5 million, because the machine C was 2 million, machine B was 1.5. But we've gone from only being able to produce 250 to now 400, right? Because we're still held back by this constraint. So we've had an increase, if you like, in 150 from 250 to 400, because we're still held by this constraint. And we multiply that by 25,000, giving us 3.75 million. So overall, we now have a net benefit of 250,000. And then finally, we have the option of just buying all three machines. So if we buy all three machines, then we now have this scenario, don't we? Because they tell us that machine A can produce 550 as well, but we're limited, if you like. Demand is 500, so it's good to watch out for that. So if demand is only 500, you will definitely have machines that have spare capacity, but demand is only around 500. So the maximum demand holds at 500 units, so additional units will go from 250 to 500, meaning you have 250 additional units. So what does that mean? You have the cost of these three machines, which is 1 million, 1.5, and 2 million, because you bought all three machines, leading to a 4.5 million cost. But then you have the 250 additional units multiplied, of course, by the 25,000. Yes, because it's 25,000 for each unit, giving you 6.25 million, and therefore having this net benefit now of 1.75. I mean, this has been a complete overhaul of the entire system, which is difficult, of course. It's this, whether or not you can afford this is the issue. But the key point is you can see the three different processes and what the net benefit or net loss would be on how we deal with this, and then we can then decide and make decisions. So that's really TYU2. I mean, work through it again and just sort of make sure you're comfortable with it. Cool, great stuff.